Welcome back to Klepper's Corner, Today in History. Today we're diving into January 30th, a date that apparently looked at the rest of the calendar and said, hey, what if I hosted most of the world's turning points, emotional meltdowns, and constitutional crises? Just to flex. And flex it did. If January 30 were a person, it'd be that guy at the gym who insists on doing deadlifts right in front of the water fountain so everyone has to witness his journey. History on this date doesn't just happen. It drops, kicks down the door, and says, pay attention, nerds. So let's do that. Segment 1, the regicide of Charles I, the birth of you can't fire me, I quit your head politics. January 30th, 1649. England wakes up, checks the weather, realizes it's cold enough to freeze a Puritan smile, and then executes its king. Charles I, a man whose hobbies included divine right, ignoring Parliament, and starting civil wars like they were seasonal pumpkin spice drinks, gets walked out to the scaffold at Whitehall. Now, Charles is worried people will think he's scared, which is relatable because nobody wants their Yelp review to say, good execution, but the king shivered too much. So he wears an extra shirt. That's right. The last great act of divine monarchy was layering. He then gives a speech about innocence, God, his rights, and the usual monarchical, I'm dying for you, which sounds a lot like someone who definitely died for themselves. England collectively groans, not because they're sad, but because they just watched the constitutional equivalent of unplugging the router to see if that fixes the government. Spoiler, it kind of did, for a bit. This moment births republicanism, accountability, and the idea that sometimes your boss can be fired with a sword. And before anyone could process this, Oliver Cromwell took over, becoming a man so unpopular that after he died, they dug him up just to re-execute him. The English really said, no backlog, we'll clear all executions by Tuesday. Segment 2, Meyerling, Royals behaving badly, Habsburg edition. Fast forward to January 30th, 1889, where the Austro-Hungarian Empire serves up its own royal tragedy. Crown Prince Rudolph, the empire's heir, liberal hope, and man who apparently never met a bad idea he didn't want to try, is found dead at Meyerling, beside his 17-year-old mistress, Mary Vetsera. Historians call it a suicide pact. Royals call it a scheduling conflict with the future. The Habsburgs then launched the most chaotic PR cleanup in royal history. First, they say heart attack. Then they say madness. Then they smuggle poor Mary's body out of the lodge like she's a mannequin they forgot to pay for. And the empire? Without Rudolph, the succession eventually lands on Franz Ferdinand, a man who tragically learns that car rides in Sarajevo can really ruin your summer plans. Suddenly, Meyerling isn't just a scandal. It's a prequel to World War I. It's like the butterfly effect, but instead of butterflies, you have aristocrats doing melodrama, and instead of chaos theory, you have 30 nations declaring war. If there's a lesson here, it's that when your empire's stability depends on a single, extremely depressed prince, maybe invest in some backup heirs. Segment 3, Hitler's appointment, the worst job promotion in human history. January 30th, 1933. Germany hires its worst employee. And to be fair, the interview process wasn't great. President Paul von Hindenburg appoints Adolf Hitler as chancellor, while conservative elites tell themselves, we'll control him. Which is the political version of letting a velociraptor into Jurassic Park and saying, he'll behave, we have fences. Within hours, there's a torchlight parade through Berlin celebrating the end of democracy. Because nothing says stable constitutional government like thousands of men with torches marching at night. Within weeks, civil liberties evaporate, the Reichstag burns, the Enabling Act passes, and Hitler goes from chancellor to dictator faster than a diet pill infomercial promises results. It's a lesson in how democracies don't always fall with a bang. Sometimes they fall with an appointment, a handshake, and one guy saying, it's fine, he'll be on a short leash, while holding the world's smallest leash. Germany learned that day that promoting the wrong guy can cost you more than awkward staff meetings. It can cost millions of lives. Segment 4. Gandhi assassinated. The light goes out, and India reaches for a flashlight. January 30th, 1948. India loses its moral center when Gandhi is assassinated at Birla House. Imagine achieving independence after centuries of colonial rule, only for extremists to say, cool, but what if we murder the one person keeping us from ripping each other apart? Gandhi walked toward a prayer meeting, offered peace, and got bullets. Nehru then addresses the nation with a speech so heart-wrenching it could make a stone cry. He says the light has gone out. And in fairness, Gandhi was essentially a human lantern of justice, nonviolence, and dietary restrictions. His assassination didn't just shake India. It forced the new nation to confront the tension between its ideals and its reality. And it asked humanity a question we still can't answer. Why do we keep killing our best people and promoting our worst? If history were an HR department, it would have fired us centuries ago. Segment 5. Tet Offensive. The day the narrative fell down the stairs. Jump to January 30th, 1968, where North Vietnam launches the Tet Offensive, a coordinated strike on more than 100 cities, shocking U.S. officials who'd been saying, victory is right around the corner. It turns out the corner had a Viet Cong squad behind it. American viewers turn on their TVs expecting bonanza and instead get footage of combat outside the U.S. Embassy. This is the moment when public competence face plants on national television. Militarily, Tet is a defeat for North Vietnam. They lose tens of thousands of fighters. Politically, they win the Super Bowl. The U.S. realizes the war isn't ending soon. Lyndon Johnson rethinks re-election. Cronkite starts telling the truth out loud. And suddenly, Americans no longer want a victory speech. They want a refund. Tet didn't change the battlefield as much as it changed the narrative, proving once again that in modern war, perception is the real infantry. Segment 6. The shockwaves of January 30th. Bloody Sunday, the Beatles, elk cloner, disasters, presidents who can't be shot, and a few birthdays. January 30 really said, let's throw in everything. So we're doing a rapid-fire Klepper montage. In 1972, Bloody Sunday, a peaceful march in Derry turns into a massacre when British paratroopers open fire, killing unarmed civilians. It becomes the most infamous recruiting event for the IRA, which is not something you want to be known for. Then, 1969, the Beatles play their final concert on a rooftop, proving even breakups can have great acoustics. January 30 also gives us elk cloner in 1982, the first computer virus to escape into the wild. That's right, the original super spreader event wasn't a pandemic, it was a teenager with a floppy disk. On this date, the Wilhelm Gustloff sinks with thousands aboard, the deadliest maritime disaster ever. Kenya Airways Flight 431 crashes. Martin Luther King Jr.'s home is bombed in 1956, but he calms the crowd with such grace that the word leadership blushes. Andrew Jackson survives an assassination attempt when both pistols misfire. Statistically improbable, cosmically hilarious. The USS Monitor launches, rewriting naval warfare. And of course, in 2020, the WHO declares COVID-19 a global emergency, kicking off a multi-year crash course in epidemiology none of us asked to enroll in. Toss in birthdays for FDR, Christian Bale, Phil Collins, Vanessa Redgrave, Gene Hackman, and Dick Cheney, who would absolutely win at laser tag. And you realize January 30th is the history buffet that never stops serving. In conclusion, January 30th is the date that refuses to be normal. A date that hosts revolutions, assassinations, musical finales, geopolitical crises, technological firsts, and the occasional president beating an attacker with a cane. If history is a story we tell ourselves to understand who we are, then January 30th is the chapter where we say, wait, seriously? All of that happened on one day? It's a reminder that the world can pivot in a second, sometimes toward justice, sometimes toward chaos, sometimes toward Phil Collins. But each January 30th leaves a mark loud, tragic, absurd, transformative, reminding us that history is unpredictable, and we are always living on the edge of the next headline. Now let's go forward, maybe with an extra shirt like Charles I, because you never know what the weather or history is going to throw at you.